Hello, world. Welcome to the first podcast in a brand new series by Tech Under 20 Chapters. In this series, we will have the honor to interview experienced industry professionals and invite the young tech community to listen in and learn something new for themselves. Today, we'll be having a conversation with Chris Pereira on the topic of personal development and setting yourself up for success. Chris is experienced in public relations and business strategy. So, please introduce yourself, Chris.
Thanks so much, Borna. I'm really glad to be here with you today, and congratulations on the inaugural podcast. It's great. My name is Chris Pereira. Just a bit about my background before we jump into the conversation. First, I'm not an expert in anything. First of all, I want to keep modest and stay hungry today.
Very humble.
But the past 15 years or so, I've worked in China, actually, in near Shanghai and in Shenzhen, working in communications and consulting. In the last 2 years or so, I've been back in Canada, working in communications also. So my role in my career has very much been being a bridge between East and West, especially Canada and China. So that's where my advice will be coming from as a Canadian who's spent a lot of time overseas.
It's impressive, bridging the gap. I'm sure we'll get a lot of questions about this after. Well, thanks for introducing yourself, Chris. Now, we have prepared some questions for you today. As the workforce gets more and more competitive, young students are trying to find ways to get ahead of the competition, even during times of COVID-19. Now, our question today will try and help these students take the next step that they're looking for. All right, let's start going down this list. Well, first of all, Chris, what inspired you to choose the career path that you've taken? As in specific fields, what inspired you to get into public relations and business strategy?
That's a great question. I actually was thinking about this in advance, foresaw this question specifically about how I got to where I am today. And especially when I'm giving advice to young people today, I think one big thing I would note is back when I was 16 or 20, I also didn't have this big picture of a career in mind. So if you don't know what you're going to do in 20 years, I think it's okay, first of all, because if you think back when I was 15, 20 years ago, I was working hard and hoping to improve myself, but I didn't have a trajectory that was very clear in my mind. But having said that, how I got into communications and business in general, I think the key was actually going overseas and seeing a different place than where I'd grown up was the first step to doing that. Went to China for my undergraduate to study Chinese language and literature, and that was purely out of interest and wanting to see the world. But when I graduated from that program, I suddenly was able to connect people in China and Canada because I could speak the language, right? English and Chinese. And those sort of opportunities came naturally after a true business need of someone needing to speak to me in Chinese and wanting to connect to someone in Canada, for example, or a Canadian company wanting to sell old equipment to a Chinese company, and me not having done that before, but figuring it out on the fly basically is how it happens. So I guess to answer the question how I got into that, it was a combination of interest plus after working hard and building some skills that connecting to real needs in the market. So the connecting Canada and China specifically, I think I was always a big reader and big on writing. And once I learned Chinese, the communication side really took off. So I think communications in general is the job of connecting people to opportunities. So two people have two needs. You connect this guy to this lady. She's looking to buy something from this guy. And you connect, and you can be that bridge if you're in communications, and can get and see very interesting business deals and help in that, making it win-win on both sides.
I see. Yes. It's all about connections, taking those opportunities, and it's just like connected dots. If you don't have dots to connect, you won't be able to make such a pretty picture. But yes, I guess when you're young, you could say
the pen, connect the dots, right? Yeah.
Take all those opportunities, connect the dots, where the dots are just people and places, opportunities, and then I guess from there I guess you would naturally be able to kind of see what you like doing. Um, well, another question. What are some previous jobs or volunteer experiences, or just general experiences that you would say have impacted you the most, mainly in terms of personal development?
Oh, great. That's good. I would say I've got two big ones in mind. One is when I was still at university. I would want to point out, I mentioned finding these opportunities after I graduated because I could speak the language and help people connect. But before graduating, there were multiple opportunities where I was not paid, but asked to, for example, be a host at a opening ceremony for a new business development project when I was in China. Because I could speak English and Chinese, I could translation / representing both sides to communicate at a ceremony, for example, and that gave a good platform to get people to see me a bit more when I was still in school. And even though it wasn't paid, and I probably lost money doing it by taking a taxi to do it, but yeah, it was good experience. So those not there's no specific work job in that category that I would point out, but over the 2 or 3 years nearing graduation, having those volunteer or free opportunities was valuable for me. So I'd just point that out for anyone doing. You could probably apply that to programming or to communications or engineering. You get out there into the industry that you're in and just help people for free sometimes. But the other one is actually more recent. Last year around this time, actually, in early June, I did a trip to the far north of Canada, to Iqaluit and Nunavut in the Arctic Circle. And I went up there to record the how high-speed internet is changing lives up north. So in Inuvik, for example, they only got 4G high-speed internet in the last few years. So you hear all the time about high-speed internet down south, and people complain. But up far north, if you leave the small town center, you actually don't even have 2G internet up there. So being able to connect to high-speed internet and use things like Instagram, Facebook, or do something like what we're doing right now is pretty new for people up there, and it changes lives. If you, the businesses you can do online, I interviewed a woman who is selling her traditional artwork on Instagram, and she actually said that her artwork sells out in minutes now when she posts online, which would be unthinkable 5 or 10 years ago. So it's pretty cool stuff. So the reason I say that changed my perspective is my previous experience was leaving Canada for China for 15 years, and a year and a half ago I came back to Canada and sort of rediscovered the country I left. And as part of that, I went to a new part of Canada I had never been to before in the far north, and made me realize again the importance of communication, but in a different way. So, unfortunately, I didn't learn Inuktitut or any of the other languages up there, but I did realize on the communication side in terms of technology, how much that can mean to people.
Yeah, I've been trying to improve my communication skills, as you know, doing so in these interviews and stuff.
Doing an admirable job.
Yeah. So I hope the audience agrees with the fact that my communication skills are on point today. Well, so I see you've had a lot of valuable experience. You know what? I'm going to move this question up. This question is, how would you suggest that young people like us move beyond the infinite loop of you need experience for a job and you need a job for experience? Because that's what it seems to be like today. Even for me, a young person who would like to seek a job, a lot of jobs, especially when I'm applying online, requires this many years of experience or requires some intense thing that I don't have.
That's very frustrating, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm frustrated about that now, even when I see those job ads. I mean, so you know you can do it, but you haven't done it before. So how do you prove yourself?
Yeah. Well, do you have any advice on that? Like, when you were starting out, how did you manage to get past this infinite loop?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So it's sort of related to another question that I would want to answer during this conversation too, is sort of what would I give what advice, going back to that time in my life, what advice would I give myself, right? Sort of when I'm 16 or when I'm just graduating from high school or university, whenever you start to look for your first real job, what advice would I give myself? And I think there's three things I would tell myself. So the first is to trust the process of this looking for a job, improving yourself. Each day you're, especially as someone like yourself, Borna, or people that are watching this, they're clearly interested in self-improvement. And by the way, I really admire someone who's pushing their comfort zone, and that you're a good communicator anyway. But people watching this, if you're learning every day and feeling a bit nervous about doing something, you should be proud of that. And so trust the process. Yeah, trust the process that each day you're getting a bit more knowledge, and over 365 days, 2 years, 3 years, that adds up to actual experience and actual confidence. So I remember when I first graduated, I also felt like that I would never get this opportunity to prove myself because no one was giving me the chance, right? But you plug away each day, and the small step that you take each day gets you down the road. So trust the process is the first thing. The second would be trust yourself more, because when I was 18, probably, well, 16 to 18 to 20, even to early 20s, I think I was less confident in myself than I should have been. And I probably overestimated the ability of others because I felt I was always sort of not as looking at people on TV or looking at people in the industry thinking these guys are light years ahead of me. In general, and you don't want to get overly confident, but in general, you're not as far behind as you think. So the first one is trust the process. Second is trust yourself. And the third would be trust that it will get better. And it's not going to get easier. It's probably going to get harder over time, but because you're going to face bigger challenges, right? The first challenge is find a job. Well, that's in the longer term, when you're 30 or 40, that's an easy target compared to get the manager position or get the executive position or handle this project, manage this team, right? So you need to trust that it's going to get better in terms of you're going to get momentum as you move forward, but it's not going to get easier. So those three would be the three that I would say advice to build that experience.
Over the years, I've been trying to incrementally improve because I know that improving so much at one time is probably less realistic. So on my whiteboard it says, "Just be better than yesterday."
Yeah. Yep.
And I think that kind of helps. And eventually I will develop to a point where I know my confidence has probably improved through various experiences, and I mean, you can only learn things, basically, right?
Yeah, I think so. Also keep a journal if you're open to doing that. I kept a journal through my university years, and I was actually looking through it recently. Unfortunately, I don't have enough time. Maybe I just haven't prioritized it recently, but I haven't been writing a journal recently. But looking back, I was actually impressed I didn't really recognize myself back then. It was like, wow, this person in writing this is pretty cool. So if you look back, if you keep that record for a year or two, you might look back and say, well, I've come a long way, because you can see the progress, right? The things you were worried about, the things you were working towards, you might realize, well, I'm light years ahead of that right now.
Yeah. And I guess if you wanted to tell if you were actually making progress, yeah, you could think back to when, maybe a year ago, maybe compare yourself to then and see how you're managing to accelerate your progress, increase the slope of the line, progress over time,
Yeah, exactly. You want to aim high, or what do they say? They think big, but start small, or move slowly, because the smalls, you'll get discouraged if you set this huge goal like okay, within 5 weeks I need to meet Elon Musk or something. Well, you're going to get frustrated because it's probably not going to happen, right? But if you say, well, within 5 weeks I want to meet 5 people from Tesla or SpaceX, it's probably more doable, right?
Yeah, small incremental goals can work.
And drink lots of coffee.
Achieve your longer term goals, yeah. And a lot of coffee if you want a little bit of a boost. Don't overdo it. For the health of the viewers, don't overdo it.
Exactly.
Well, next question. As young people going into the industry, we discussed improving yourself, but on what specific skills? Like, what do you think are the most important skills for young people to learn, in today's day and age?
It's interesting. So right now we're more connected than any time in history, right? If you look on the street, everyone's connected on their phone. We're connected by this video chat. We can call anyone in the world for free anytime of the day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And yet I think our generation, I'm putting myself in your generation, which isn't accurate, but in our generation, the people are losing a certain type of communication skill, I think. The number of people who are able to really communicate well with people and feel comfortable talking to large groups of people, for example, or manage a team, is actually not as many as you would think, given how well we're connected now. It's easier to send a text message. People don't want to pick up their phones sometimes, right? And I personally prefer a phone call because it's faster, and I really hate writing long emails that are misunderstood at the end once you send it. So the skill that I would suggest people focus on, I think the tech side is important. Everything is going to require some tech knowledge in the future, but the number one skill that will help you move up the food chain in the long term is people skills, and that might just mean getting on a Zoom call, or it might be forcing yourself to have a coffee with someone in person every day after COVID-19. There's a good book called Never Eat Alone, which I lived by for a couple years when I was working in China, especially. So every time you have lunch, especially lunch, you should never be having a sandwich by yourself. You should, regardless of whoever it is, it needs to be someone you haven't met before or haven't seen for a while. You have lunch with them, and you could go extreme and say breakfast, lunch, and dinner if you want. Girlfriend might not like you after a while if you do that, but you should push yourself to improve your people skills. Yeah, that would be my number one recommendation for skills, and that's an quote unquote easy one to practice. Not an easy one to improve, but it can be improved. Yeah.
And back to those incremental improvements, I feel like all these calls, especially interviewing experienced industry professionals, I feel like I have increased in communication skills. Like if I did this last year, and I remember some experiences when I just had no soft skills whatsoever. In my interview, when I became a part of Tech Under 20, my speaking skills were so terrible. I kept cutting out, stuttering, but yeah, I see why communication skills are lacking today. With all this tech, we don't really see each other face to face, or not even through a phone call anymore. So even though the tech skills are valuable, because obviously we're going into a techie world, but the fact that we're going into a techie world entails that we're communicating less and less. We're making it more convenient for ourselves, and it's still important to maintain those skills because, I can't think of an industry that doesn't prioritize those skills in a person. Communication is important for all aspects of working with other people.
Yeah, communication is like talking. At least in my mind, I think it's like a toolbox. You gain tools over time. Like you'll have a certain number. So when I present, for example, about the future of technology, I have a few stories that I like to that are stuck in my mind that sort of connect to different parts of the topic that I talk about. Turns of phrase they'll start to be easier to flow off your tongue. And also, if you do enough of these Zoom meetings and things like this, every time that you don't die after is your worst case scenario is, oh my God, I'm going to say something really, really dumb and everyone's going to laugh at me forever. When that doesn't happen 10 times or 20 times, then you realize, okay, it's not that bad, right?
Yeah, that's why it's such an honor to have you here. Once again,
here.
always improving with my skills and stuff. And I guess in your opinion, that would be quite an important skill for young people to learn, right? What do you think are some other of the most important skills for young people to learn today?
Yeah, I think apart from the communication side, sort of soft skills, I think we touched on that. But if we think about hard job skills, first I would say what you shouldn't focus on. And I think if in general, because there's a big audience watching this, I won't get too specific in terms of industry, but I would say anything in your mind that you can think of where you're collecting data, looking at or arranging that data and then using that data, don't be in that job, because that's going to be automated. So specifically like stock market trading, for example, you analyze the market, you decide on a strategy, or you collect the data about the market, sorry, and then you analyze it, and then you make a decision on a buy or sell, for example. Yes, there's some human intuition related to that, but in general, from what I can see, I'm not an expert in that, but from what I can see, a computer does that better than humans. Humans get scared, humans get excited, buy too much, sell too soon, that sort of thing, right? So any industry where you're collecting information, analyzing it, and using it in a robotic way, don't be there. Just one more example would be in law firms, legal lawyers doing case research. If they want to find a precedent for a certain topic, currently it's actually machines that will do most of the legwork to find the precedent, find the keywords, and analyze which cases might be most suitable for their current purpose. So it's just another example. But interestingly, just to counter that, just food for thought when we're talking about automation, when I go buy a coffee at Starbucks, I prefer to have a coffee that's made by a human than if it was just to press a button and pay. I like the fact that I can talk to a human, tell them that I want a black coffee and top it up. It doesn't actually add any value if you think about it in terms of the product, but the human interaction is still important. So that's just to say that the human communication skills are still, there's value there. So having said that, on the positive side, which jobs should you focus on, or which skills? I think one thing I would suggest is having at least a rudimentary understanding of programming. The logic of how software works is important. You don't necessarily need to be a programmer, but if you're going to manage a team in the future, you're probably going to have programmers or tech people in your team. And when they come to you with issues, you need to understand what they're talking about. So that would be one. The other is the skill of, this is sort of a soft skill, I guess, but being able to learn new skills is important. When you graduate, I'm not sure what your mindset is, Borna, but I think a lot of people, when they graduate, they are thinking they're done their learning, they're ready to make money. I don't think the model of a university 4-year degree is actually that relevant to the current job market, because we need to be, if it was me who was designing the school system, I would almost make it modular, where you're in a business like after high school, for example, and when you need a skill, you go do a 3-week course, you get a little certificate, and you put that under as a badge of honor or something, and you continue in your career. But right now we're sequestered for 4 years. We learn all this knowledge, forget most of it, then go to work, and then you're going to have to learn more stuff. So maybe we could look at and talk a bit more about that. I think that's an interesting topic, sort of the university years and what value you get. I'd be interested to hear your view on that too.
Yeah, I do think, that would allow for a more customizable options, and that would overall serve as an improvement, because in my school, even me, I realized that, some skills are actually not as useful as they seem. English class didn't help my communication skills as much as something like communicating with actual people, and school isn't really designed for, it isn't really made tailored for certain people. So if people were able to choose the skills and, choose the courses that they actually want to use, I think that's pretty useful. And you were talking about, what was it again?
Sort of the modular learning and 4-year degree. Sort of trying to jog your memory. Maybe I'm making it worse.
To the beginning.
The soft skills, being able to learn throughout your life was the key message there.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So yes, when I enter a position, I never want to stop learning. I think learning is a fantastic opportunity, just like incrementally improving your skills. Learning, having a passion for learning, I feel that's a fantastic thing for that incremental improvement. Speaking of learning, What skill are you most proud of learning or improving on yourself?
Actually, I think it's actually the ability to communicate well. Because I used to in high school and up to high school, I was a big book reader. I think I could write better than anyone in my class, and those people around me, because I was just reading all the time. But I was practicing so much my reading and writing that I wasn't really talking that much, and I was a bit of an introvert. Now I would say I'm a introverted extrovert, in that I like to talk to people now. I get energy from people, and that change I'm quite proud of. Because in the past, maybe it was because I wasn't as experienced in talking with people, so it was tiring every time I had to uh, deal with like speaking. But the fact that I can feel energized by having a conversation like this now is something I think I'm proud of, and it's from lots and lots of practice.
You know, when I was younger, like in middle school, I just tried to, in a way, simplify communication as much as possible, which kind of
Make
um,
it very transactional, right? But
wasn't
you
a
need
good
a little bit.
idea in the long run.
Yeah.
But you know, it was probably the algorithmic mindset. You know, always programmers always try to simplify their instructions. So I
Also,
kept my
if you're
vocabulary really tiny.
if you have a tech mindset, you want like the logic of a program, or like for me, it was like the logic of a book. I can read. I can the sentences make sense. I'm following the story, but the human factor of not understanding people, especially when you're younger, it's like this person doesn't make sense. Well, they don't make sense because they're a person, so you need to deal with the randomness of humanity. So that might be part of it.
Yeah. And obviously communication is a really valuable skill. But I also know that creativity and innovation is also heavily, uh, it's a heavily valued skill in today's industry. Um, you know, Creativity gives people value, uh, and I'm sure you probably have a lot of uniqueness that you probably apply in the workplace. What techniques do you use to foster your own creativity and innovative thoughts?
Yeah, my suggestion for that, or my approach, is to go for a walk in the I'm usually in the evening after dinner to sort of process the day. So I mentioned I get energy from talking with people, but I also need time to recharge and think about things. So no matter how busy you get in the future, or how busy you are now with school and work, etc., put aside half an hour or an hour just to either listen to music and go for a walk, or not have music, just walk and process. And don't it doesn't have to be an actual task in your mind. Just walk and see where your mind goes. And some days you won't think of anything. You'll just be, oh, thank God this day's over, and going to go for a walk or a run. And other days you'll be thinking about a conversation you had. Maybe you'll be angry about something. Then you finish your walk, you'll be okay. And through that process, you'll come out the next day in the morning with the sort of, you'll be back on your feet and be ready to make an interesting decision, because you will have thought about what happened. What you don't want to do is be so busy that you can't see the bigger picture, and you're just dealing with the weeds in front of you. It's like you're in the jungle cutting away the branches, but you have no map, right? And yes, you're going forward somewhere, but you're going to feel more and more lost as you move in your career if you don't stop and think. Yeah. So
Yeah,
so in other words, the creative, quote unquote creativity, I think is just, it's not actually a magical thing in my mind. It's the creativity is what happens when you stop and analyze and make a unusual decision, because you have all the cards out, and you know what might be interesting to try.
yeah. I think creativity involves a lot of connecting together different areas that no one has ever thought of before. You know, just like back when I talked about connecting the dots. If you have all these thoughts and you could like knit them together in a brand new way,
Yeah, and it's
that's
also
a
a muscle, right? The more you do it, the better you'll get at it.
and I love that part about music because personally, I love music a ton. I probably listen to it on a daily basis. And whenever I have some
You also play
extra,
music?
what?
Do you also play music? Do you play an instrument?
Not an instrument, but I make digital music, And
Okay.
that's kind of like a box where I just put when I have excess creativity or I'm feeling adventurous, I just kind of, make a nice track and box it up, put it on SoundCloud. Um, Maybe people want to listen to it. Um, I just try and be innovative with it. Like that's probably one of the reasons uh, my music is so unnatural to people. Um, it's alternative hip hop, but I use very experimental beats
Great.
along with
Shoot
it.
me a couple links when we're done here. Love to hear that.
Sure, I could share my SoundCloud if you like.
Great. I'm regularly criticized for my choice of music, so I won't criticize you. I'm very eclectic also.
When you listen to it, you'll be very amazed at the how unique it is, I guess.
Great.
Um, well, we know creativity is a very valuable skill, whether it's in, coming up with new solutions for a design, coming up for a brand new way to design, the car, perhaps, or whatever technology I can find in my room. Maybe you design an innovative clock. There's a clock on the wall. Um, it comes handy in places like engineering, uh, music, obviously, a lot of the creative fields, and even a lot of the technical fields. Even I'd say even mathematics, when you're trying to make some kind of breakthrough, creativity is an element that plays a large role there. Obviously, I love creativity. I think it's important personally. Also, um, but what do you think are some techniques and strategies that you've used to boost your time management skills? Because time management is a pretty important skill for, once again, improving as fast as you can over time, or just getting things done. You know, the more things we get done, the better. How would
That's a great.
you, yeah,
Yeah. So how to manage your time. So I think there's two parts to that. One, and there's two sides of the problem. One, so managing time, on the one hand, you might have the problem of not doing things, so procrastinating. On the other hand, you might have so many things that you're not doing the important things. So it's either one or the other if you have time management issues, I think, and you want to be in the middle. So the first, to address procrastination, because I think that was more my issue than the other one. When I was, especially in high school, I was playing Counter-Strike all the time. And I felt guilty playing it for some reason. And at the cost of, so I had a part-time job after school, which I did so 4 or 5 hours after class. And then when I got after class, after work, I would go back and play Counter-Strike for a couple hours and 1 a.m. And that would be the day, right? With no homework, unfortunately. So the issue there was procrastination. I felt like I had to do that homework, like it was a chore, and I didn't want to do it. I was always thinking I need to do this, and I was sort of whipping myself. Okay, you have to do this, right? So whatever you're not doing that you think you should do, here's the trick to start doing it or not do it. So the key to procrastination is this secret. You don't have to do anything in your life. You don't have to do anything at all. What I mean by that is if you are willing to accept the consequences of not doing anything, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to eat. You don't have to drink. You don't have to go for a walk. You don't have to put on clothes. Eventually, you're going to have some issues if you don't eat and don't drink water. But so that's the extreme. But if you think of class, if you put yourself in the position of you don't have to do that homework, but why are you in that class? What's your goal? So if you orient yourself towards the goal and not towards what you have to do, quote unquote, it can be really powerful. Because when you're feeling like you need to whip yourself, I think to get things done, I suggest just stopping for 5 minutes and telling yourself, look, how about I'll be nice to myself today? I'm going to go do what I want to do. I'll go play a video game. I'll go for a walk, watch a movie, and it's okay. But if I want that goal to be realized, eventually I need to write this homework. So how about I give myself a little break right now? I'm not going to be a jerk to myself tonight. I'll watch half the movie, and then I'll do half an hour homework today. And then the next day, maybe you'll feel a bit better. You say, okay, that was nice. I was nice to myself. Today I'll watch another half of the movie, but I'll do 40 minutes of homework, and build yourself up like that. And I think now for me, I have no problem with procrastination because I am very clear that anything I'm doing I'm doing it because I want to, because I want the result from that. So eating is I want to live. So I've never had problems with wanting to eat, but it's just a silly example, But the just realize that anything that you do in life, it's a choice, as long as you can assume the consequences. So, but on the other side, if you're too busy, so my issue right now actually is, and many people, once you start your work, you get so many emails and things that you could do, and how do you prioritize that? And my suggestion for that is first figure out when you have the most energy in your day. So for me, it's in the morning. As soon as I wake up to about lunchtime in the afternoon, I get a bit sleepy and my brain doesn't function as well. Probably it's caffeine overload and overdosing on coffee. But in the morning, I'm doing well, and I manage. What I do then is the important things, the big things where I need to use my brain a lot. So if there's an email I need to respond to, or someone's asking for my advice and strategy for a project, or I need to have a call with someone important, I do it in the morning. That's why we're doing this in the morning, Borna, Vancouver time. You're important. So then
I'm a morning person.
Yeah. So find out what your personal schedule is, or your cycle in your mind, for your energy cycle, and put the important things in the morning. And then if you have a whole bunch of mindless emails that you need to respond to in the afternoon, do it when you're sleepy and less when your energy level is a bit lower. So, and the last part of that would be some things that are in your mailbox or on your to-do list. Maybe you just cut them. Some of those emails, maybe you don't answer, because at some point you need to prioritize what's on your plate and what's not on your plate, or say no to people. If people are asking you to do something you don't have time, it's better to say no than try to put in too much and end up disappointing them. People respect a no more than a sorry in the future.
Yeah, I see.
I'm not sure if that answered your question or not, but that would be my response for the procrastination and having too much on your plate.
I see. So it's all about, setting your short and long-term goals and then realizing why you're doing the things that you do on a daily basis. And I think I've applied that strategy I've latently applied that strategy of, knowing that I don't necessarily have to do anything. In this context, I just didn't. I have assignments that are like month overdue right now. I mean, that sounds bad, but look,
I think I have a few emails that are overdue too. It's okay.
Yeah. So, I never felt like English really helped me as much as doing other things like improving my communication, actually improving my communication skills, or improving my programming skills. So I didn't even do the English work because, hey, my mark doesn't drop, and it doesn't help that much to write an essay. Instead, I'm doing things like this and improving my programming skills. I think that's going to be helpful, more helpful than doing the English essay. But yeah, sometimes you just got to realize, what will I get out of this? If school was still on and the mark actually mattered, then I would actually be getting something out of it. I'd be getting a higher mark, a better chance to not lose my university admissions. But yeah, really got to think things through, see what your goals are, and that allows you to
also be kind to yourself. I think if you have something that's so overdue, like a month, my tendency is to be really hard on myself, call myself names in my head, things like that. And if that voice in your head was actually someone next to you, you probably wouldn't be friends with that person, right? As they're so mean to you, say, oh, why are you not doing this? It's a month overdue. What are you thinking? But then you still don't listen to the voice, and you continue to procrastinate, right? And it's quite bad if you think about how we talk to ourselves, and just having some compassion and empathy for ourselves can go a long way to slowly build your resilience to do things you don't want to do. You could do for your essay or the project that you haven't done, you could just tell yourself, okay, today I'll write 3 sentences, and then the next day you write 4 sentences. So if you set that goal, today I'm going to write 3 sentences, well, you're going to achieve that goal and you're going to feel good. You're not going to be super proud of it, right? But at least it was a success, right? The next day, 4 sentences, rather than say, okay, I need to sit down and write this 1,000 word essay today, and there's a chance you will fail because you get frustrated or just tired, right? And then you feel terrible. So set the goal small at first and you can achieve it.
Yeah, and yeah, don't go too hard on yourself. It's that incremental growth. Don't want to curse yourself in your head.
Yep, exactly.
That's probably not very healthy. I'm pretty sure I used to do that.
Yeah, most people do. It's quite natural.
Well, yeah, that helps a lot with time management. Another useful skill, which is something I was skeptical about, risk taking. You know, I've heard, maybe I'm mistaken, but I've heard that risk taking is a valuable skill in the industry, but risk taking is also risky, isn't it? Well, firstly, maybe describe a time when you took a professional risk.
Yeah. So after university, I found a full-time job. I worked there for 2.5 years in Canada. And at the end of that, I could have stayed there. They gave me a very good offer to continue working there. But I decided to quit and start my own business to do consulting, which I mentioned at the beginning. And in that moment, when I had this full-time job, I could foresee what I would be doing in 40 years. And it was kind of scary. That's another kind of risk, actually, is not to take the risk, right? But when I was hovering over the keyboard with my resignation letter, the send button, I stayed there for about an hour. It's sort of the crossroads, right? As soon as you press the send button, you're all in. And when I think about that now, I'm so glad that I made that jump. That it's kind of scary to think that what would happen if I didn't. So what I mean by saying there's risk on both sides is you see the risk of failure, but you don't see the risk of the other type of failure of not achieving what you could have achieved, right? So having said that, when you're about to take a risk, make it a smart risk. Make it worth it, first of all. And also think about the worst case scenario. So for me, when I was about to leave that position, I calculated how much money I have in the bank, calculated how many days, if I had no income, how many days could I survive without a job, without income. And I was at like 150 days or something at that point. So it was reasonable. I'm not going to be homeless in the next few months. And I'll have a month or two advance notice if I'm going to starve to death, and I can I can take countermeasures, right? So think about the worst case scenario, and if you're ready to deal with that worst case scenario, there's nothing to lose, and except to say that you fail, but you'll be proud that you took that chance.
Yeah, that's an excellent decision-making process. Always do the math whenever you can, and that's how they say calculate your risks, and that's how you do it. If only there was a calculator that could, like tell the calculator, hey, I want to start this business, and then it'll be like, okay, it's this risky or something like that. But it's good to have that skill so that you can do it yourself and, see just how risky something is to do.
And think how fun it is to tell people whatever the risk is that the people listening or yourself are thinking about. Think of how proud you're going to be to tell people next week after you make that choice. Yeah, I just quit my job. I'm going to try doing my own business, or whatever the risk is. Treat it as an adventure. I think that mindset's important in life. So if you do fail, you'll be on your back, laugh at yourself, and say, "Well, that was dumb." Stand up again and try again, right?
Yeah. And failure, you could just take that as something to learn from. Yeah. I mean, I think you learn from failure, maybe even more than success.
Absolutely.
And yeah, always calculate your risks.
Yeah, think about I think it's the 7 Habits for Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey, if I remember correctly. In there, I read that when I was in high school. But in there, he has a system that you can use, it's like making deposits into your own self-esteem. And if you make that choice to jump, you make a big deposit into your own self-esteem to say, yeah, I took this choice for me, and I didn't choose the easy road. And that's having that deposit in your soul, or whatever you want to say, however you want to call it, your self-esteem, makes a big difference down the road when you need to make a harder choice.
Yeah, staying motivated, keeping your self-esteem. Speaking of motivation, how how do you stay motivated throughout any setbacks that you may have had?
How do I stay motivated? I think it goes back to what I just mentioned about treating your life as a type of adventure. So if you have a setback, it's a twist in the plot in some ways, and having some a sense of humor about your situation is helpful. So, yeah. So I'll say, just as an example, with my choice of quitting my job, say it went badly. It didn't, but it went quite well. But say it went badly, and I had no customers, no one was answering my emails, and everyone ended up saying this is a bad choice. And I think, well, I could have been a comfy middle manager in this other company. Well, if you view it as a plot twist, you'll have some sense of humor. You'll still be proud about it because you made a jump because you thought it was the best choice, and you're going to grow more than if you stayed in that position. So it's almost like you can't lose. You can lose in terms of money, for example, but you can't lose in terms of experience because you got more experience by failing than succeeding, like you just mentioned. Yep. And staying in a cozy job doesn't mean success. If you stay there for 40 years and regret it, you were successful in that you didn't lose a job for 40 years, but you failed in that you don't feel like you lived a full life.
Yeah, knowledge is power, and experience is power. Experiencing things like failure and, not just staying in the same job for 40 years. I think getting out of your comfort zone is a way for you to realize that, there's a lot more opportunities for you. That's how you get the dots.
Yep.
So that you can connect them. And, that's how you move forward instead of staying at one position, like at that job for 40 years. That's how you move forward and get that, that incremental, take the staircase to success one step at a time,
Yeah. And you can be really proud of that. You've said the old saying, fall down 9 times, stand up 10, right?
Yeah. So we learn a lot from failure. And forgot what I was about to say. Maybe I'll remember it eventually. But
Wow, this is really, really awkward now, isn't it? No, I'm just kidding.
yeah.
Forgetting, actually, you know what? Forgetting something like that, that's in a future podcast, it might be interesting for us to chat about sort of specific communication skills. So I remember practicing, because I did a lot of hosting at one point in Chinese language, and doing it in your second language, it's even more likely that you will forget your lines or say something wrong because you're basically memorizing it, especially at the beginning. So I actually practiced. I had like 2 or 3 backup lines in my head for when I did forget, because I was going to forget. Okay, and I'm going to introduce this. Don't remember what the award is. Don't remember what the guy is. Someone help me. So having that repertoire in your head's helpful. We could look at that in the future. I remember practicing that a lot, actually, because I'm preparing for failure like that. But I think putting yourself into tough, challenging situations is good for you.
Yeah. And learning from, speaking of learning from failure, I just learned from failure that, this will eventually be less of a problem over time. And in fact, in that process, I actually remember what I was going to say. So we were talking about stepping out of your comfort zone and taking those opportunities, even though, just valuing every experience you have, not just staying in one place. One personal experience I had was when I was in grade 9. I think I was really afraid of taking new steps, taking opportunities, going to clubs. When I was at club fair, I was like, oh, I don't have time for these clubs. I need to take the bus home, and the bus would leave by the time this club is over, or something like that. That was one of the things stopping me, and
it was for me
those
too.
things stopped
Just
me.
the logistics of how to get home, right?
Yeah, and so that was something. Luckily, I got past that, and the clubs have changed my life at school. I probably wouldn't be here without the help of clubs like Tech Under 20s chapter and stuff like that. I would actually not be here. I would probably lose my interest in computer science. I got that interest from the computer science club. All these clubs, they became those dots that I'm connecting right now, and they're basically building who I am today. Of course, that's why stepping out of your comfort zone is important, because my comfort zone went from this small zone here, and now it's really large. And now
Hmm.
stepping out of it is a lot easier because, these opportunities, I can see a lot more opportunities from my large window of comfort aside from this small one, the small one I used to have.
Yeah, I think that reminds me of when I was at university also, that there would be clubs later at night, and on a tight budget, the buses don't go until like midnight, right? So you got to either take a taxi or find a way to get a ride home. I wasn't living near the university. I did 2 years at York University, and during those, I'm specifically thinking of that, driving in Toronto over long distances to get home, and those sort of roadblocks can. I think it's good that you pointed that out. That if you find a way to solve it, it can be life changing. Because you can't go as far as you could if you do it by yourself. Being with a group of people who are motivated and ambitious makes a huge difference. And I think that's one of the things I underestimated when I was younger. Also, that the power of a group of like-minded people.
Yeah. And speaking of going to school, a lot of us are in school or are transferring into university. That's kind of our age group for second and 20. Um, what are your thoughts on how significant school itself actually is? Not the opportunities it leads you to, but, having a degree and stuff. How essential is it to your life, in your opinion?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Depends which role you're looking to fill in the future. Doing a degree in art history or something might not be the best idea right now. But I'm going to put aside those sort of less likely degrees and focus more on like a STEM field degree, or a well, maybe we'll focus on STEM for this one. So science, engineering, math, that sort of thing. So for me, when I'm looking at a resume, what a degree tells me is just one thing, actually. It doesn't tell me anything about a person's skills, but it tells me that that person persevered for 4 years or 3 years, whatever the case might be. So that's a good thing. It doesn't tell me much else other than that. When I was in China, I can't tell you how many people I met who have an English degree but can't speak English. So the same goes for other fields as well. A successful test doesn't necessarily equate to a successful engineer or a successful programmer necessarily, and there's lots of exceptions. But when I'm looking, so when you hire someone, it's sort of a zero-sum game, right? You either hire this person and it's a success, or it's not. So you want to maximize your likelihood of successfully finding a good person for the role. So if you think, so what your question was sort of from the student perspective, but if you think of from the employer perspective, what are they looking for? So the degree will probably make it easier for you to get an interview, because that's sort of like telling them, okay, this person persevered through something in their life, whatever it is. But after that, what's going to get you the job is your people skills in that interview. And then after that, what's going to make you successful in your job is your actual skills. So I think there's 3 things to keep in mind there. You can convince the HR person that you're able to persevere in another way other than having a degree. But you should, if you don't plan to have a degree, you should have a long-term project or some successful thing that you've done that took a long time. Because I think that's the one thing that I get from the degree is I need someone who won't give up when the going gets tough. Because you join a new company, you have the honeymoon period, you're all excited, and then it gets boring and tough, and you have an argument with someone, or your project doesn't go as well as you'd like. Is that person going to persevere and not give up? That's the most important thing. So to answer the question about the degree, I think especially if it's an engineer or science direction that you want to go, it's just a fact of life that people want to see that degree right now. I don't really think the system that we have right now is the most efficient and effective for learning myself, but that's the world we live in for an engineer, for example. So getting that degree could be important for you. Having said that, in the future, I would keep an eye on that trend, because we could see universities, for example, get disrupted by something like the Khan Academy or some online training, like I mentioned earlier, with the modularized training. But right now, people don't recognize that as much. HR doesn't recognize a mini course. They place a lot of emphasis on a certified diploma. So not sure if I answered the question specifically, but I think it depends on where you're going, and think about what that degree tells someone about you.
So the degree is basically proof of concept that you have experience in this certain field, and it makes it a lot easier for employers to detect that, even though it doesn't necessarily mean that you're better, but it's a good indicator. And I think that we do need some change in the way that HR does their hiring. It's kind of a very, strict kind of thing. Just like we discussed modular courses, which would probably be a better way for people to specialize in different areas that they enjoy, and not just get the same education that everyone else gets from their degree, but to become a unique member with unique skills. Even though university does bring up a lot of opportunities, I guess you could say it could be worth the tuition. This is more of a personal question, not even on the list, but what would you say about like comparing the prestige of different schools? Like, how does that matter in the long run? Like, and also like with college and university, does it really matter? Mainly the prestige of your school.
Yeah, in the past, I didn't think it mattered. So it's not just the prestige of the school. I think it matters the prestige of the first few companies that you eventually join, depending on what you want to do in the future. If you want to be an entrepreneur, none of this matters at all. You don't need a degree. If you become an entrepreneur, what the consumer or your customer cares about is, are you providing value to them, right? Is the product good? But we're assuming here you want to find a job with a company. I think a good brand name is important for a resume, just like whether it's a university or a first company. So having I won't say any big names here, actually. I'll just keep it neutral. But having a big top, like a Fortune 500 company on your resume makes a difference, I think, because people will say, "Oh, this person was liked by XYZ company." Well, they must be reliable in some way. The HR at that company thought they were good. So that sort of recommendation is valuable, I'd say. So on the other side, if like the top school on the Maclean's ranking or whatever ranking you look at for prestige, having a top 15 school or whatever you think is reasonable on your resume can make a difference also for the same reason that this school saw potential in this person.
Yeah, I see. And I guess, yeah, a lot of what HR sees is like the fact that this person can provide value, and it really depends on how you want to show that. Like, just like with that loop of you need experience to get a job. This experience is obviously a good way to set yourself apart. So I guess you could say, this is not just a school. If you're an amazing person, you would be able to get valuable experience anyways, right?
And also share what you do on LinkedIn. If you don't have experience, if you're at clubs, try to become the president of a club, even if it's a small club, even if it's the club you start. You can be the president of a club if you start it, right? It's like when you start your own company, you're suddenly elevated to the level of CEO overnight, right? Of course you don't want to exaggerate what you're doing, but having that, sharing that hey guys, just wanted to share, I'm really proud to have started XYZ club, put it on your LinkedIn, and ask your friends to like it. That can go a long way. Yeah.
I've been getting more and more active on LinkedIn. I think it's important for, everyone to know what I'm doing and just see how I'm spending my time. Maybe I feel like, it could get me a lot of valuable people, get me to know a lot of valuable people out there, especially professionally. I think, just like with getting those dots to connect, that's why they're called connections, Yeah.
No, it's absolutely right. And when you share something that you're doing, whether it could be as simple as just reading a book, or an article online, you share, hey guys, I just read this article, I think it's interesting for this reason, and you share the ones that are related to your future career path. And that stuff also, over time, people will see, well, this person is very engaged in the industry, and you can reach out to people at certain companies that you think are interesting, and if you have them as connections, they'll see you sharing that stuff. And you might, serendipity is a pretty strong thing. If you put yourself if you're ready for the opportunity, you can seize it when it comes.
Yeah. So making a LinkedIn account and being active is probably some great thing that youth can do, kind of prepare for their future career and, get their professional self out there into the world. What other advice would you give to youth? Last but not least, what other advice would you give to youth to prepare for their future career? Wow.
Be flexible. Don't have this is probably going counter to a lot of advice that people have heard in the past, but I've had very mixed experience trying to plan a long-term career. So I'm thinking, when I say long-term, I say like 10, 20 years in the future. I think if you're working hard and you're really all in what you're doing, every year or two, you're going to become so much better than you used to be, that new opportunities will open up, and your entire career path, maybe you were originally going to go like this in your mind, but suddenly you can go straight up, and then you go on a different path, right? So don't shy away from an opportunity that seems like it's 90 degrees from what you were originally going to do. They call it a zigzag resume, actually, in HR, where someone has made a big jump from one thing to another because of an opportunity, and it might change your future career path, but it would also be more interesting and more fulfilling in the future. So the first would be to be flexible when you find opportunities, and be open-minded. Choose the path that scares you a little, as long as it's not it's like going on a roller coaster, right? As we were talking before the call, you get on the roller coaster. At the very top, you sort of wonder why you're on this thing. You go down the steepest part, and then you have fun. Yeah. So yeah, do the stuff that scares you, and last but not least, make sure you're enjoying it. Don't put all of your enjoyment 40 years down the road, because we only live once, and you can enjoy the job that you do. Some days you're going to wake up and wish you didn't have to work and just want to stay at home. And maybe one of those days is a day you can stay at home and be nice to yourself and say, okay, I don't have to go to work today. I'll let them know I'm going to work from home. But in general, you should be doing something that you enjoy.
Yeah, just like taking opportunities, riding a roller coaster can be scary, especially as you ascend the 100 meters or so at the beginning. But then as you descend, you start to feel the thrill. And just like with getting out of your comfort zone, I feel like that's where it's so rewarding. Like, here's a personal example. I started going to hackathons mainly because I found that it wasn't so hard after I went for one time. Hack the North is Canada's largest hackathon, and it was also my first big hackathon, and I was scared. But I applied, and, I was like, oof, maybe I won't get accepted, because who knows, I'm not that skilled yet. But then I did get accepted. Now, and that was going up the hill of the roller coaster. And from there, I was like, okay, I already got accepted. Now I have to go. I have to get out of my comfort zone.
Yeah, you're already sitting in the coaster, right? There's no getting out now.
Yeah, can't jump out now. So
that's the same with those. We were talking about risks, right? And when you send that, I was talking about sitting on that send button for an hour. As soon as you press send, you're strapped in, right? So if you sometimes you just have to force yourself, put yourself into the roller coaster, lock the restraints, and say, okay, let's go. You might regret it for a little bit after, but you're all in, right?
Yeah, YOLO. You only live once. It's all that risk taking and stuff. Make sure you calculate your risks well. But I know that going to a hackathon is probably a good opportunity. So absolutely. I went, and I actually had a great time. We made a great product, and I realized that there was nothing scary about it. It was just, this part. And then from there, we were all good. And then ever since, I started going to hackathons a lot more frequently. And you see, that's just the process of stepping out of your comfort zone. For everyone in the audience, hackathons are great opportunities, but there are tons of other opportunities. Maybe like come to Tech Under 20's competitions. Maybe you'll see me there. I don't know.
Awesome.
And these opportunities, stepping out of your comfort zone is exactly what we want you to do. And they're really helpful because with a bigger comfort zone, it's a lot easier to capture these opportunities. And, you just incrementally build yourself up once again. Using the metaphor again, it seems to be applicable everywhere. But yeah, that's a really useful skill to have.
Yeah, the only thing I don't like about the roller coaster metaphor is you end up at the same place you left when you stop, which is not the case. If you take that risk, you end up somewhere higher in terms of experience and self-confidence than you started. So sort of like a roller coaster that drops you off somewhere where you didn't start.
Yeah, and yeah, it's given me so many rewards, like not just prizes, because hackathons have prizes, they're very scrumptious, but just being a more outgoing person in general, meeting so many new people at these events and stuff.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I mean, prizes are cool too. I mean, I got headphones in the mail.
Is usually what I'm going for. Yeah.
I can replace these ones because I got a prize headphones, so that's cool.
Yep.
Yahoo! But anyways, yes, taking those calculated risks, that's a great thing to be doing. And that was our final question. So I guess we had a terrific time, a terrific talk. I hope everyone in the audience can make use of this valuable knowledge and maybe pause at some moments to take a deep thought or, go back. Because though people in the audience can do that, we can't because it's live. But anyways, that was a fantastic talk. And we are now going off the air. Goodbye, everyone. Have a fantastic day.
I really enjoyed the conversation, and if anyone in the audience, including yourself, Borna, if you want to follow up by LinkedIn, feel free to reach out to Chris Pereira.
Yes.
Thanks again for the conversation.
Yes, everyone. Reach out to Chris Pereira. He is very outgoing. He will definitely help you out, I guess. Very helpful to me, at least. This was a very valuable talk, and I've learned so many things in the past 40 or so minutes. It was amazing to have you here, Chris.
Great. I hope to be back soon, and congratulations again. I hope the podcast goes well.
Alrighty. Goodbye, everyone.